It's the start of yet another week. It's the last day of July, by the way, so tomorrow, the 1st of August, may bring some decent weather, but it's unlikely, apparently. According to those who know, it's going to be very wet. So we've had a very, very cold and pretty nasty wet spring. We're now not having much of a summer, and so some might say you've actually moved straight to autumn already in the 1st of August. Let's see how we go. Tim Montgomerie is here, former number 10 advisor, founder of Conservative Home, of course. Tim, a very good morning to you.
Mike, what's happened to you?
What do you mean?
I'm worried.
Why?
You're hopeful about good weather. Do you not live in England? And you're also believing that Rishi Sunak's going to change his green policies. Normally you ask the hard-bitten questions, and suddenly you've turned into someone who's optimistic and hopeful.
Listen, I've always been optimistic, Tim. I just disguise it well. The point is that, you know, if Rishi Sunak has finally stumbled upon the recipe for success, he may well be onto something, and I think he has, by accident, by the way. But I think there's nothing wrong with being friends to the motorists. I mean, we haven't had any friends for a long time.
No. Well, look, spoiler alert, Mike. Yeah. I think if he was serious about undoing some of this, you know, green stuff, green crap, as David Cameron once described it as, and, you know, rescue poorer households from the huge cost of making these changes, I would be optimistic as well. But I'll tell you where this ends. He will raise the hopes of hard-earning families that something will change. But actually, the big business and other international interests that already invested very much in climate change policies, he's not the kind of politician to reverse this. He hasn't got the guts, I'm afraid. This is all politics, rushed in the aftermath of Uxbridge. And it will upset both groups. Green voters will lose any residual faith in the Conservative Party, and those hard-earning couples who, families who hope that there might be change, but they will soon find their hopes dashed.
But isn't it time, though, that the Conservative Party found itself, though? And they do need to find something to hang their hat on. And so if there are enough people in the party who say to Rishi Sunak, you are actually onto something, you will hold on to some more seats if you do this, then surely he will be swayed by that, won't he?
Well, look, Mike, you know, the green industry, the green blob, whatever you want to call it, you know, the banks are hugely invested in this thing. Huge amounts of US federal money is going into combating climate change. This is the big thing in the global economy at the moment. If you take this on in any meaningful way, you know, you need all the guts and resolution of a Margaret Thatcher. It's that big, and it can't be done on the edges if it's going to be meaningful. Everything I've seen about Rishi Sunak suggests to me that he doesn't have the plan or the drive to really change things. And the only thing that might just possibly do it is cynicism of people like me, you know, calling his bluff. Giving a little bit of encouragement will, I'm afraid, only appeal to his worst instincts. I'm sorry to be so cynical.
No, listen, I'm glad that I found somebody even more cynical than me. I mean, it's a pleasure to actually witness it. But here's the other thing, though, that as he kind of goes, as you say, not very, very controversially down the road, he might be swayed to at least put things off for a bit, because he's quite good at doing that, isn't he? I mean, he's having an inquiry into low-traffic neighbourhoods, which he's hoping everybody will forget about, and nothing will actually happen. But he's quite good at putting things off. So if that's the best we can hope for, maybe there's a chance he will at least change the 2030 deadline for petrol and diesel cars not to be made or not to be sold here anymore. You know, there might be something in it.
Well, if you want a little bit of tinkering at the edges, I'm not saying that won't happen, although I think that diesel ban is strongly opposed by Michael Gove, so I don't even think that will happen. But who really wants tinkering, you know, at a crisis like this? The Tory party certainly doesn't want tinkering. When you're behind in the polls as much as, you know, the Conservatives are, you need a bold agenda. And you also need to be absolutely disciplined. And, you know, our candidate in Uxbridge, one thing I will say about him, it's the only issue he talked about. He genuinely cared about it. I'm not sure that Rishi Sunak cares enough to really take on the huge vested interests that make this much bigger than big oil or any sort of other interest in society. The money invested in this climate change agenda, for good or ill, is, something to behold.
Yeah. I'm going to make one final desperate attempt to sway you by saying, what about his own vanity? Because does he really want to be one of the shortest, notwithstanding Liz Truss, prime ministers? I mean, I know he's one of the shortest prime ministers in stature, but does he want to be one of the shortest ever reigning prime ministers in the Tory party? Because that's what he'll be if he gets shunted out of office next year.
Well, look, vanity affects people in different ways. Also, if he does this, he will be attacked by the great and the good, the heads of business, the people that were praising him when he did the furlough scheme, all of the talking heads on programmes in the media, this one obviously accepted. It will be the establishment. International leaders will, treat him as a pariah. So if it's his mission, if he really wants to do it, great. But I don't really see any evidence for it. I think this is a reaction to Uxbridge and a little bit to the Farage banking issue. Yeah. And I don't think any of us should raise hopes too much. And what we should do to Rishi Sunak is say, look, this is what, if you're serious about this issue, this is the kind of change we want to see. If you're not going to do that sort of stuff, then shut up, because don't waste our time.
But isn't there also an alarm bell going off in the wokest arena, where you've got the banking scandal at NatWest, and there are many people, most of them regular working people who don't give a stuff about wokery, who are looking around saying this has gone too far. So let's maybe not listen to the banks, maybe not listen to the big corporations who seem to want us to live a particular way and say things that they want to believe in. Could this be an opportunity? And you're right, you're probably going to say to me, he's not the guy to do it, and you're probably right. But there is a moment to grasp there, isn't there, for somebody brave?
Well, look, if you had Nigel Farage as Tory leader, it would happen. Nigel Farage listens to the ordinary vote and doesn't care, what the great and the good think. Right. Rishi Sunak does care a great deal, and not just for bad reasons. These are the people, who, when he was Chancellor, are the big investors in Britain. They're the global leaders who he meets in summits, that is, with Biden and so on, he signed important defence agreements. So ignoring what these people think has consequences. Now, you're prepared for those consequences if you think this is an absolute core purpose of yours. But if you're just thinking, maybe this is the way I can, save some seats at the next general election, then sorry, you probably have to expel me from the Independent Republic now, Mike.
Well, not really. It's just a shame that we've reached this point in politics where principles and convictions and beliefs actually don't seem to really matter very much, because if you want to be in with the in crowd, you just have to move along with them.
Yeah, and Mrs. Thatcher, of course, was the great exception to this. She was willing to take on the vested interests of her time. But I should say, one important footnote to that, she fought her battles wisely. The miners, who were a huge vested interest, in the 70s, brought down the Conservative government then. She waited a number of years to fight them, because she knew the country wasn't ready for the kind of energy crisis that a coal strike would produce. If you're going to take on vested interest, if you're going to fight for something, make sure you know what you're going to do, who your allies are, etc. It can't be written on the back of a bag paper. And politicians who career into this, a little bit like Liz Truss did, say they have the radicalism and ambition of Thatcher, but haven't thought things through, are worse than useless, because they actually discredit the underlying cause they purport to champion.
Yes, and she did a lot more damage in that way, I suppose, than we maybe perhaps know.